All right, we are live. Garrett Marshall, welcome back to the Future of Fitness, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. The best lexicon in fitness,
Yeah.
as I always say. I really want to make that stick, Garrett. I don't know. Maybe you can like change your Instagram handle to like Fitness Lexicon or something like that for me. I think it's good. I think it's really good branding for you
Yeah,
personally.
it is. It's the best. It's probably the best compliment I've had all year, and it is great branding. But can you trademark something like that? I don't know if you.
I would imagine so. I mean, you can trademark it. I don't know. I tried trademarking this podcast, and we're getting off topic already. But it turns out future fitness is a tough one, and so I don't know. Fitness lexicon seems a little bit more specific, but yeah. Anyway, I digress, man. And just a keynote, everybody. I just learned what unit level economics means from Garrett about 5 minutes ago. So you're probably going to learn a lot more than that on this podcast today. Yeah. So let's get into it, Garrett. There's always plenty, and I don't want to waste any time when I get you on the show. I mean, we're going to talk about digital, what that means for the fitness industry, the greater landscape, the progressions, what you see coming down the pipe. What's really exciting too is, by the time this airs, there'll be a big announcement about what you're doing with Meta, also known as Facebook, Instagram, in the VR space, which that's a big deal. So we're going to circle back to that, but maybe just to kick us off, Garrett, like, give us a little update, like what's been going on the last like year or so of your life and your role at Xponential as head of digital, and what are your insights on the current landscape of digital fitness?
Yeah, of course. There has been a lot going on. In fact, we just had our first annual Investor Day last week on Thursday, so that was cool. We went back out to the New York Stock Exchange, hosted some demo classes right there. Anthony rang the closing bell on the Wednesday night before, and then we got to spend a half day with a room full of analysts, just getting to go a level deeper and about our business and the future of our business, more so than what is standard or what is covered typically in like a 10Q or an earnings call. So lots of that kind of stuff. And, in terms of digital, I would say, yeah, it's a good question. Like any business, my life as I reflect on it over the last year has probably been a balance between trying to innovate what we're doing digitally and then just running the play for all. We launched our D2C streaming platform called Xponential Plus last May. So that's been very successful for us. It's been in the wild for about a year and a half now. So there's been plenty of bandwidth devoted to just getting that off the ground and operating it. So.
Awesome, man. And I know Xponential, we've kind of talked about, had an interesting year, right? I think any public company in the fitness brick and mortar space is just coming under a lot of scrutiny. I mean, I guess just in the fitness space in general, because I'll throw Peloton in there and a couple other ones, right? It's just been an interesting year. And, your specialty specific to like digital and innovation and technology, as I and I were discussing, like the industry seems to have this, dichotomy of like, it's got to be good or it's got to be bad, right? It's either like digital or in real life. You can't have a combination. They can't complement each other. That's where a lot of people in the industry seem to come from. So what say you, Garrett? Like when you look at the benefits of digital and where we are maybe in the growth curve of that technology, like where do you think we are, and what makes you optimistic?
Well, I guess maybe to start with the end of that question, what makes me optimistic is I think we can look to most other retail industries to get a sense of how digital and in real life come together. I think it's fairly immature to try to cohort customers on in real life versus digital, because that's not the way consumers behave or make decisions. And we don't have to waste time on it here. But if you think through yourself as a consumer in any other industry that you transact, you make purchases, you'll recognize pretty quickly that decisions aren't made that way. So I think we're going through a phase of maturation with digital fitness right now. Look, to really be to the point, like, so digital fitness, it's growing. I think it's growing, and it's a lot more pervasive than a lot of the legacy industry is aware. If you look at U.S. online fitness, which, by the way, excludes a lot of ancillary categories like wearables and apparel and supplementation and others that actually have a connection to what, that broad term of digital fitness. But if you exclude that, US online fitness has a forecasted CAGR that's 4x the size of US fitness health clubs. And so if that actually plays out over the next few years, you're going to see an inflection point in the next probably 2 to 3 years where US online fitness, and that is really US online fitness, that is really the delivery of streaming workouts and let's say coaching and training plans, just that will actually eclipse the market revenue for US fitness clubs and studios. So, that's one piece not to ignore. Underneath that, I think, and as probably as a byproduct of that, the landscape in digital fitness has become a lot more competitive. It's a lot harder to do. And one of the reasons for that, you brought up unit level economics. We were chit-chatting before the podcast. Is the unit level economics. So if you can look to some of the more mainstream players out there. You mentioned Peloton. They disclose a lot of data. I've never seen them actually disclose their customer acquisition cost or CAC for their digital only customer. But as you probably know, because you're very much a steward of the industry and have your finger on the pulse on everything, Barry McCarthy, their CEO, that is what they proclaim as the future of their business as they try to kind of untether themselves from the hardware side of the business. But if you do back of the envelope math with the data that is available, I would estimate that their CAC on a digital only subscriber is probably, in the very, very best case, $150. Okay. So there is a lot of publicly available data for just consumer SVOD in general, which would include things like Hulu and Netflix and every streaming video on demand service. So pretty much consistently over the last 2 or 3 years, monthly churn for broad consumer SVOD ranges between 7.5% and 10% monthly, and most streaming fitness businesses parallel that pretty closely. So if you look at somebody like Peloton, who's selling a $12.99 subscription, you do the math on that really quickly, and the lifespan of those subscriptions, what you get is a very, very thin return on ad spend, and such a thin return on ad spend. So we're talking like less than 15% probably. You'd have to be doing business at an extremely high gross profit margin or net operating margin to even make money off of that. So if you were to pull a report today of the mainstream players in the digital fitness space, and I'm talking about direct to consumer apps, really, excuse me, what you'll notice is that most of the ones who have sustained and continue to grow, the streaming part of their business is just one revenue line of a mix of different revenue channels in their business. So they can do a couple of things. One is they can spread the customer acquisition cost across other areas of the business, and they can also use that streaming as a loss leader to promote other revenue lines, whether that be to sell hardware, as is the obvious case with connected fitness, or wearable devices, Internet of Things, nutrition. Gymshark does this to a certain extent for apparel. And then there are other examples that use streaming to supplement or augment completely different business models. Like FitOn's acquisition as an example of PureFit is a really great example, and I think highly great, very strategic move. So, again, it's become very, very much more competitive. But I think if you were to come back to the surface, I do think that D2C digital fitness is still winning the battle for that first party relationship with the consumer. And that's pretty well evidenced in the data. We know that over 70% of consumers use at least one digital fitness app. And that's an old statistic. It's probably higher than that. So, like for easy math, call that 250 million Americans are engaging with digital fitness. Wow. You've got about 60 million in total who belong to any gym or any studio. So I think that's a silver lining and a bit of good news to the legacy industry, that there's this large audience out there who are engaging to a certain extent that haven't fallen within the classic definition of a fitness consumer, right? And so I think that provides a lot of runway or a lot of opportunity for the businesses that are in operation today.
Yeah, really insightful, Garrett. I mean, that was you just rattle off a lot of really interesting data points and insights through that. And one of the things that kind of stuck out, I mean, Peloton, I haven't even looked. I mean, $12.99, that seems a little low, right? Like when you look at D2C digital fitness, like what's the range? Is there an average subscription rate? I mean, that just blows my mind to be so low for such a high quality brand.
Yeah, I think it's $7 to $8 on the low end, and then $20 on the high end. That's the um, pricing range that you're seeing. It also parallels exactly with consumer SVOD. So again, if you look at Netflix, Peacock, Paramount Plus, HBO
Hmm.
Max, and go down the line, their price range is almost identical. They have an entry product. Typically, now what's different in consumer SVOD, not fitness SVOD, is most of the $8 and $7 to $8, $9 products in consumer SVOD are ad supported. So they're not actually SVOD, they're AVOD. And that price point, if you look at 2022 acquisition, is the faster growing area in consumer video on demand. It's the ad supported, so that part of the business is that part of the industry is really growing. Then they sell kind of their more premium, greater access to programming, no ads. That gets up closer to the $20 range. So interestingly enough, the larger fitness platforms are kind of within that same range, but normally the separation is just on what you can access in terms of content. I haven't. I'm personally not aware of any that are running a traditional AVOD model that would include ads.
And
Not
just
any that are at scale.
and just for clarification on those acronyms, AVOD, FOD, like can you just outline what those are to the audience?
Yeah, sorry. So SVOD is streaming video on demand,
Okay.
and AVOD is advertising video on demand.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a really good kind of current state and where we're at, and it's interesting to look at, even the evolution since you and I began talking on this podcast over the last like 3-4 years. But where do you see the evolution happening? Where do you see the innovation happening in digital fitness now?
Well, it's such a broad term, isn't it? Digital
Hmm.
fitness. Like I
Yeah.
think that kind of paradoxically to that comment, I think that within the conventional and legacy industry, I think that digital fitness is going to take on a broader definition or a broader use case. So if you think about I'm at Xponential, we are in the gym and studio, the fitness clubs and studio industry. And most of the development around digital fitness and it makes a lot of sense why, started from the bottom up rather than the top down. Um, and that makes sense because of the fact that in COVID, it was a means to an end. So the role that digital fitness plays, and when we say digital fitness, really we're talking about probably streaming workouts and PT coaching or training plans. And so that was a means to an end that was necessary during COVID. And the role that it played, I like to think of it in the context of like a user journey. The role that it played in the user journey was actually delivery of service, right? But now that COVID has passed, right, and a lot of operators failed to build digital from a top down, like actually looking at the entire user journey and how digital fitness could fit in the business model or bring value to the consumer that would enhance the business model. It's been harder to sustain. So I think for the operators that are successful in the near future, they're going to uh, use a broader definition of digital fitness, incorporate it in other areas, and expand on it more creatively. So if you go back to the previous statistic, we're saying, okay, there's 250 million Americans, give or take, who are engaging with at least one digital fitness app, but there's only 60 million who belong to gyms and studios, right? Like, what are they? What is it that they're doing? It's not entirely a workout, right? If you look at the top 10, top 20 largest, most popular mainstream D2C fitness apps, you see things like All Trails, Strava, Fitbit, MyFitnessPal, everything from nutrition utilities to calorie counters to social communities, all of these things, right? And then of course there are also your Pelotons and the others that are the workout. but largely, I think the industry's missed that. Right. One of the silver linings, a bit of good news, is if you are a business that's creating content today, or I should say, if you're doing digital fitness within the context of streaming workouts, training plans, or coaching, that is all content that can be sliced and diced and used in other areas of the user journey, most notably search and discovery, creating awareness. Once you chop all that stuff up and you get it across social media, you get it into the online ether, right? It gives you the ability, it has a zero marginal cost of distribution. So once you've capitalized the cost of content, you get it out there and it can go work for you and it never costs you a dime more. Gives you the ability to monetize people that are outside of your traditional business radius, right? So on and so forth. So that's like farther up in the funnel. It's a big part of how we use and leverage digital at Xponential, both at the corporate level and then through our local channels. Then as you move through the user journey, I think you're going to see more brands embrace things like testing, whether that's biomechanical or even genomic or DNA, et cetera. Those
cool.
are going to give brands the opportunity to create real interaction with consumers before those consumers ever pick up the phone or walk into a physical location or a brick and mortar. So that's what I mean by, I guess, broader use case or broader definition. It's digital fitness to me is much more than just creating workouts that people can use when they're not in the studio. Of course, that's one part of it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You know, I'm thinking for the listeners too, like the brands that seem to be leveraging digital fitness are big, right? Xponential, Peloton, like, you know, a lot of really big brands who have a vast pool of resources. You know, at what point, I mean, if you look at the greater industry and operators within it, like at what point do you think it's worthwhile for someone to start leveraging digital? Like, and what I mean by that is like, you have to be, if you're going to do it, you have to be able to do it somewhat well. Right. And, you know, costs are going down. I mean, there's a lot of ways to, you know, very inexpensively create applications now, which, you know, used to cost $100,000 or more to build. Right. But who do you think, like, if you look in like the mid tier of operators or those who are maybe just even, you know, single location, yeah, who should be leaning into it right now?
I think the question, the bigger challenge, is more one of operating model, because to be successful with digital fitness requires core competencies that probably don't exist if you're a brick and mortar business, and that requires kind of a different skill set, potentially different people. But the creation of content itself, the beauty of that is it doesn't have to be expensive. In fact, there's data out there to suggest that millennials, and in particular Gen Z, have an affinity for content that's less highly produced and more genuine and raw, which is clearly what we see on with engagement on things like social media. So I think less of the concern is probably the creation of content itself. I think more of the concern is building in the right core competencies so that digital can be successful for you over time. It's really easy to overinvest without the underlying, I'd say, ideation, testing, measurement, that whole, you know, lean product management loop. And then just go, oh, it doesn't work, we're not seeing the return, and then kind of pull out of it completely. But I do believe that, you know, it's like the cliche you hear people say today is like every business is a technology business, right? Or every business is a software.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just getting over a little bit of a cough. Every business is a technology business. I do believe that's in some ways true. I think, you know, the competencies of being able to have someone, at least from a product management, a technical product management point of view, who may not be the one that's building, as you pointed out, applications, but has the acumen to manage an outsourced provider, so that strategically you can ensure that you're not at the mercy of the desires of your product development partner. Right, you need to have that. You can't outsource that strategic layer or management layer, and so I do think businesses of almost all sizes should be looking at how they incorporate those core competencies in the near future.
Right on. I appreciate that. Let's discuss the big deal that you've got going right now. I mean, you and I talked a little bit about it at IDEA. It wasn't, it's very hush hush, but now we can talk about it openly because, by the time this goes out, but you got to deal with Meta, man. We're going into virtual and augmented reality. Like, tell me about it.
Yes.
I'm dying to hear.
Well, it's actually a great segue off of the last point of kind of like how
Yeah.
digital fitness is evolving. And we were talking about this large audience of Americans who are engaging with digital fitness, but may not be coming into gyms and studios. So how do you reach those people? I think another trend you're going to see over the next few years, or maybe you're already seeing, is just the successful operators are going to find these differentiated distribution channels to reach consumers who maybe aren't part of that core customer set who, belong to a gym or studio. And I pointed out the FitOn PureFit acquisition. I think that's a highly creative and clever way to reach a new customer audience. And there are many examples of that. One for us is this relationship that started about 18 months ago. It's a three-way relationship with an app developer and Meta to develop Xponential Plus VR, which will launch in the Quest marketplace November 2nd. And it's interesting. This is on your podcast, the first time that I've shared this with anyone publicly, because we have a marketing embargo. We're actually not allowed to announce this until 11 a.m. on September 27th, which will be shortly after the keynote delivery at their Connect event on that same day. And so we have an NDA, which allows us obviously to talk about this now, knowing that it's going to air just a few days later. So by this time, the information should be out. We have worked. Well, let me take one step back. So the preface to this is that when you look at these big technologies, AR, MR, XR, VR, if you're listening to this podcast in September, you know that there are many large companies who are jumping into this space quickly. Apple's recently announced their Vision Pro. Meta has a truly remarkable device that they'll be officially debuting at Connect, which will be a few days before this airs, called the Quest 3. Sony, HTC, all these companies jumping in to the space. The reason is that they realize, although we are early, this is going to be mainstream technology, and it's really just a matter of time. So right now you have a first mover advantage race towards these technologies, and so we partnered with Meta in order to bring a level of realism to augmented reality fitness that's just never existed before. If you look in the Quest marketplace, and I shouldn't say Quest, but all VR marketplaces today, you'll notice that every fitness experience within those is kind of I call it a whiz bang experience, where you're swinging from tree to tree and jumping over volcanoes and this sort of a thing. If you've paid attention to the rebranding of Facebook to Meta, they are placing the company's future on the metaverse. And, Mark Zuckerberg recognizes that there's a stigma around VR today of this kind of whiz bang type of gamer bro community. And it's been largely embraced by the gaming community, which is what's, sort of led to the initial adoption. But part of the race to being successful in VR is removing that stigma and making everyone comfortable, not just to embrace these technologies, but take fitness as an example. You've got to wear it, you're sweating in it, you're getting a great workout. And so this Quest 3 device that they've been working on for several years is one of the manifestations that makes this possible. So it's 40% slimmer than the Quest 2 and Quest Pro devices. So a lot easier, lighter on your head to wear. And so you think about the impact of that, or the implication of that with fitness. If you're doing downward dog, you've got your head upside down, or you're doing a neck stretch in Stretch Lab. Big and bulky isn't great, right? So that's one effort to make it more mainstream and more applicable to the experiences for which consumers want to use it. The Quest 3 has incredible mixed reality and full color pass through with accurate depth perception. Another new technology that's highly relevant to fitness experiences. So we have 10 brands. Most of our brands, obviously, we have the the fitness dependent or cardio brands that require, like Stride requires a treadmill, Cycle Bar requires a bike, Row House a rower, so on and so forth, right? And those modalities will also be in VR, and we can talk a little bit about that too, which is really, really cool. But even the others, at minimum, require some small peripheral. If it's Yoga 6, an example, maybe a yoga mat. Pure Bar, you use light dumbbells. Club Pilates, you use double tube as an example. And so the fact that you now have mixed reality, previously this was a limitation that made most fitness modalities cumbersome or difficult in the VR, and possibly some people might even argue unsafe, because if you're in a full VR environment, you don't want to throw a punch and hit your wall or run into a table, et cetera, right? So mixed reality gives you the ability to bring an instructor, one of our celebrity X pros, into your living room. And you're seeing that virtual instructor, but he or she is standing with you in full color, three-dimensional, right in your living room. And so if you're doing a set or an interval where you need to bend down and grab, it could be floor work, you need to bend down and grab light dumbbells. This new technology allows you to do that with complete depth perception and accuracy. And what becomes really cool, and I'll cut it short in case you want to drill down on any particular aspects of that, is the ability in that mixed reality environment to take gameplay elements and actually blend them with your physical environment. I'll give you one example. And we've got a really cool commercial that's launching in conjunction with Meta, which I can share with you if you're interested in linking to that shows a couple of these features. But as an example, in Pure Bar, one of our modalities, if you're an at-home user, typically you're using something like a chair or maybe the edge of your island or a countertop in place of where you would use a bar in a studio environment. So in that MR experience, at the beginning of that class, you will calibrate a surface in your physical environment to be used in place of that bar, but it actually looks like a bar. It's a virtual bar. And once you calibrate and lock it, so let's say I have a chair to the right side of me here. At the beginning of class, I will calibrate it. I will see a virtual bar, and behind that virtual bar is everything in my physical reality. Once I calibrate the bar to that surface, it locks in place spatially, and it stays there. So for the rest of my environment, I might see Eric, my instructor, in front of me. I see my couch. But off to the right here, spatially, I have what looks like a virtual bar, which may actually be calibrated to an edge of a chair. So it creates these hybrid experiences that are obviously very immersive and engaging, but bring that to life in a way that's safe and compatible with the physical environment that you're actually in.
Wow, that's gosh, man, it just blows my mind. Hearing you talk, I'm both really excited. I'm in awe. I can't believe that this is part of my lifetime that I'm seeing all of this, right? Like the technology is incredible. I read, Ready Player One 10 years ago and thought that's going to be when I'm 70, right? But it's just happening so fast. It's really interesting. I mean, and you guys have such a great advantage, or I guess tools to make this successful, right? You have all 10 brands, you have various experiences, you already have loyal consumers. Maybe walk me through, and you have a little bit, but let's pick one. Let's pick one with the hardware, Row House, right? Walk me through that consumer experience a little bit more, just so we can understand how the hardware plays in, and the differences. I think a lot of people are just getting to know the difference between AR, MR, and VR. Sounds like you guys are kind of shying away from complete VR, right? It's mostly AR and augmented and mixed reality. And you can clarify that for me if you want. But yeah, let's take the Row House experience and go from there.
Yeah, let me make one comment too to take a step back, and I'll walk you through. what's going to be interesting about this is the existing audience, which is large. There are about 30 million people who have a Quest headset today.
Wow.
We're launching in collaboration with the hardware launch of Quest 3. And we will be one of the showcase apps to promote that technology, because the way we've built the app in concert with Meta was designed to leverage the latest and greatest feature sets of that hardware. But it is backward compatible as well. There's about 30 million headsets in the US, but that demographic is very much in contrast to the demographic that we serve in our brick and mortar locations. So
In what way, Garrett?
every demographic way. Um,
Okay.
Aside from gender, because the split in the Quest marketplace, I think, is 60-40, slightly skews male. Maybe I think it's about 60-40. Don't quote me on that. We're very dominantly female, like 90-10 across our brand portfolio. But then across every other demographic, maybe with the slight exception of age, the demographics are opposite. So it's going to be it's intriguing though. And this goes back to that idea of differentiated distribution channels. For us, it represents truly an incremental opportunity to go beyond our existing customer base. Will some of our customer base purchase a headset and use VR? Of course, but probably not the majority. So our strategic rationale in this is to really reach new customers. And what we're betting on is that there are customers out there who will recognize our brands. They are aware of the proof of concept and the effectiveness and the entertainment value that each of our brands deliver. And they want the realism that we've leaned into in our application of this technology, as opposed to the other. I'm not going to say gamified, because our experience of Xponential Plus VR is gamified as well. But the core of the experience has been designed to mirror the experience that you get in a studio, and then we lever VR, AR, and MR to enhance that. So moving on to to a brand experience, when you open this app, you're dropped into an outdoor mall environment that looks very akin to the type of, let's say Westfield in Century City, or Spectrum in Irvine here. I don't know if you've been to either of those, but the type of places that you'd typically find our studios. So you drop into this environment. One of the things we've done in the app is we match your virtual atmosphere to your local atmosphere. So like if you're in Montana or I'm in Irvine, could be nighttime, could be daytime, could be sunny, could be overcast. When you drop into the mall, you get the same outdoor environment. And we did that because of this idea that we want to lean into realism, where others have leaned in more to the, whiz bang sort of aspects of fitness. So drop in this mall, in front of you, you see storefronts, some storefronts that are not our brands, but a storefront for every one of the brands that we own. When we launch on November 2nd, there'll be 3 brands usable: Pure Barre, Club Pilates, and Stretch Lab. And then the others will roll out sequentially, basically every 45 days from that point forward. So you pick a store, you walk into it, you land in the lobby. The lobby is the virtual environment. The lobby and the studio are built identically to the store build CAD plans that we use when building a physical store, right down to the equipment, the location of the equipment, the peripheral equipment that's in the studios, etc. You pick a class, you go into the studio. Now, at this point, you have an option. So this is about your question are we using primarily VR, MR, AR? You have the choice as a user. So if you want to train in a fully virtual environment, you can do that. So you could be in a Pilates studio, as an example, or Stretch Lab, and you are in a virtual environment that is identical to one of our actual studios. There is an option in the gameplay to then change that to mixed reality. Mixed reality gives you, the best way to think of it is almost like a gradient. So you can see the top of the studio environment, and then underneath it, you see your own environment, but it blends together. And so depth perception, the way the content is filmed, the reason you do that is if you've got to do lateral movement, or if you've got to pick up, like we said, peripherals and things like that, there's value in being able to see a part of your physical environment, but you still get the immersion of the mixed reality. And then you have full color pass through, which is, it's more like AR or extended reality, where it's just you and one of our celebrity instructors right there in your physical environment without any of the kind of the studio immersion surrounding it. So, just to touch on some of those quickly, I think some of the area that we're most excited about, and it maybe gives a real life example to how these technologies are going to change the way we've viewed fitness experiences. So you pointed out rowing as an example,
Mm-hmm.
and you and I probably talked about this, and if we haven't, you're certainly aware of this, given where you focus your attention. And that is, there's been a lot of focus, or there's been a lot of discussion over the last 5 to 7 years with businesses trying to figure out how to cross integrate data, get performance data off of equipment. And there's been approaches where some companies have gone direct. There have been others who have looked at themselves as a middleman to aggregate that data and then share it out with other platforms. And there's been a lot of I would say a lot of investment, or some consequential amount of investment there. One of the really cool things about these headsets, and they're just going to continue to get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, is that the camera technology and the computing capability within it is so significant that when we to take rowing as an example, for the release of Row House, that device can actually capture your strokes. It can critique form. It can count repetitions. It can count your stroke rate. All of the performance metrics that are relevant to that experience, the device can do without any physical integration to it, just by looking, because the camera technology can see what your body's doing, right? It has a variety of other sensors in it. So it completely absolves the necessity for that physical connection or software layer to get data. It's cross platform or cross equipment, in the sense that you could be on any rower, right? And the experience is still, the user experience is still the same, in the sense that it can make use of that information and then direct the gameplay accordingly.
Garrett, who do you think? I'm sure you've researched this and you've thought a lot about it, and you probably just don't know yet. But who's going to be the early adopters of this? Specifically like your app through Meta. Like who's going to grab on early?
I think if we're correct in our customer research, I think it will be a cohort of the existing um, Quest population who want the real life, tried and true, and proven fitness experiences in comparison to what's there today. So our approach, we've said, look, we'd rather be a dominant fish in a big pond for a small group of people, rather than trying to create something that's designed to kind of get people off the couch who have never exercised before. So just the mass of that user base, there'll be we're banking on the fact that there's a percentage of those people, like other Americans and consumers in our customer audience, who have the technology and want the real, tried and true, tested, proven fitness experiences.
And how long have you been working on this? I can't imagine that this just happens overnight. Like you have to have very special dev team. You have to have, you mentioned like CAD design, like all that, like that takes time. Like how long have you been working on this project?
It since last spring of 2022.
Okay.
And at that, it was very challenging. So we had to submit our final app build to Meta in June for a release of November 2nd. And prior to that, there was an alpha and a beta submittal before that. So it was a rush to get it done. We work with a fantastic partner who's been just incredible in the development. And there's been a lot of learning too along the way.
Yeah, I bet. I think a lot of people from the industry who listen to this may freak them out a little bit, right? Just a little bit. Like this is a significant entry point for the industry that could, make a huge impact in the next 10 to 20 years, if not be one of the main sources that consumers take in fitness content and fitness experiences. So when you look at the grand landscape, and we'll just put an even 10-year vision on this, like where do you think this is going to be in the greater, health and fitness landscape?
10 years is hard. I think even
Mm-hmm.
5 years in some ways is hard to predict with the rate of
Mm-hmm.
change that we're experiencing. But, I
Yeah.
think at maybe at the very macro level, um, the technologies within what's come to be described as Web3, I think are going to really supercharge engineered well-being. So I like one of the topics I've tried to pay attention to as a beacon and try to make the parallels to fitness is precision medicine. And so I've been using the term precision fitness. And I think that you think about what composes Web3, you're really going to see acceleration and improvements in precision fitness, in individuals' ability to really precisely drive towards the outcomes that they want. And I think you'll have businesses and innovators who make that extremely simple. The user doesn't want all the complexities that come along with that engineered well-being. It needs to be made intuitive and extremely simple. And when it's there, that's when you're going to really see these like technologies embraced. So, like if you think about it, over like the last 10 years, we've seen a lot of improvements on the input side of engineered well-being, particularly with like wearable devices. So you've seen a lot of advancements in the ability to collect and capture data pretty seamlessly. But I think in the next 10 years, you're going to see much greater improvements on the output side of engineered well-being, particularly in thanks to like AI, right? AI will have an unprecedented ability to actually make use of all this data that we've been collecting to provide direction and guidance far better than, and I hate to sound draconian in this, but it's just the truth, far more effectively than a human being would ever even come close, and do it really fast, right? So that's going to be a big game changer. Obviously, people have talked about like decentralized data and the ability for a consumer or an individual to own their data and then actually make use of that across the various facets of their life, whether that's with their doctor or with their fitness professional, if you will, and so on and so forth. So you've got AI, you've got AR. AR will be able to in some cases, take that enhanced guidance and recommendation. Enhanced guidance and recommendation, and actually serve it up to you in an entertaining way and connect you and so on and so forth. So, I think as operators, it's easy to get lost in, the buzzwords of the day, the buzzwords of the industry. I think what's important is, try to come back to what is fundamental to consumer demand and the things that won't change, like, affordability, convenience, personalization, and above and beyond all is effectiveness and outcomes in fitness. Those are going to be the things that, regardless of the fads in technology, and I wouldn't say fads, but the changing technologies, those fundamental drivers are going to stay the same.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because in my mind's eye, I was thinking like all the buzzwords I've heard over the last 3 years in the industry, right? Like over the pandemic, Web3, even a lot about VR, AR, and then it kind of went quiet, right? The buzzwords changed. This year it seems to be personalization. I don't know; these are just the ones I've been using a lot. Democratization, right?
Yeah.
Consolidation. A lot of things end with TION. But when you like, I'm so glad you brought it back to kind of the fundamentals. Like, forget the buzzwords, right, for a minute. Just follow the long-term trajectories based on what we know to be true, which is all those things that you just mentioned. So, AI and VR, AR, Web3, all these things, they're tools to be used, right, to get to where we want to go. And since you brought up AI, it's like my favorite dinner topic now. You know what? And we don't have a ton of more time, so I'll kind of get your high level thoughts. But where do you see where are the most significant shifts that you think AI will have on the fitness and health industry at a high level? I know it's a hard question to answer in a few minutes, but give us what you got.
Yeah, I think to bookend the point that you made, I think the hype cycle for these
Yes.
new technologies can oftentimes cause overdevelopment and a lot of confusion. I, I think that the augmented reality type of technologies, and I think the large players who are trying to change this would also admit those have not, those have not crossed the chasm into the mainstream world yet. AI, on the other hand, I feel is on the second hump of the S curve or the hype cycle. So like 10 to 7 years ago was the front of the S curve or the hype cycle for AI. And now I think we're in a place where um, you're going to see implementation over the next few years that has a really meaningful impact. It's not going to be just talk. And I mean, you're kind of already seeing that with ChatGPT and Dolly and Midjourney and the way that that's displaced some traditional work. To answer your question with fitness, look, fit at the end of the day, being well and being fit in all senses of that is a quantitative endeavor, right? It's a science, and AI is perfectly suited to um, improve recommendations and guidance for consumers in a way that the human being can't. And so I think the initial applications where AI will be used will be to do that in a personalized, to use that word again, but in a personalized way um, that previously wasn't possible. That's a scale challenge, right? A scale challenge that AI can fix. So, like in precision medicine, right now there are historically. If you go to the doctor for a condition like, let's say it's a GI issue, there's a series of treatment medications. It's kind of trial and error that they'll put you through until they find either the right medication or the right combinations of therapy for you. There's a lot of time, money, and sometimes negative consequence that impact the patient having to go through that trial and error process, right? So there's focus in medicine right now to quantitatively measure more effectively to personalize medicine, right? And AI can run those simulations by the millions to try to, to produce new drug compounds, to analyze DNA, all of these things, right? And I think to a smaller, in the near future, at a smaller scale, you'll see some of those improvements in fitness as well. And I think, you'll see some lower touch services become more automated and more digitized. And then, of course, much bigger, more impactful changes over a longer time span.
It's an interesting time to be alive, Garrett. It
Very,
really is.
very.
And I look at like, where AI comes in. I think things with high level complexity, scalability, these are the buzzwords that I think about AI. Is how do we take incredibly complex things that would take a lot of human time, a lot of research, and then how do we make that more accessible to more people? And I think the precision medicine, precision health, all those things are probably the most promising. I mean, we've had people on the show who are really into health and longevity experts, like super smart people. And, people will come to their clinic. Dr. Florence Comite is one of the ones that comes to mind, like come into her clinic in New York and spend $100,000 a year, right?
Sure.
For longevity and optimal health. And now, through technology and they're launching an app, they can get that cost down to 10%, right? Of what it would cost to be in clinic. And that's just the start, right? And that's a huge jump, right? That's a 90% reduction in cost. Maybe not the full service that you would get in person, but it's a huge step forward to get to a lot of people who, just before, like when we talk about the other 80% who don't engage in fitness and health, structured fitness and health, like that's where we can get them. And that's some of the most promising things that I see. And, when you sit on like the scale of like utopia to Skynet of AI, which is what I call it. Like, I'm somewhere in the middle and I fluctuate day to day, but
Yeah.
it sounds like you're probably more on the utopia side.
Yeah. I'm not a futurist or a technologist by personality. I like technology to solve real world problems. I always joke with people, I don't sleep outside of the Apple Store before the next iPhone comes out. But I really enjoy finding making use of technology to solve real world, very impactful problems.
Yeah, awesome, man. Well, Garrett, I want to respect your time. I know you got a lot going on, especially with this upcoming launch. I mean, it must be a very exciting time for you. I imagine you're sleeping enough, but maybe not as much as you'd like. But if people want to get a hold of you, they want to discuss this, or if there's any particular place you want them to go to learn more, where would you like to send them?
Yeah, you just email me, Garrett at Xponential.com.
That's easy. Right on.
Yeah.
Well, Garrett, thank you so much for joining me and giving me the update on this. It's really exciting. I can't wait to get this out and tell people all about it. And great job. Keep up the innovation. Every time I talk to you, it's like you got something huge coming down the pipe. So it's a lot of fun connecting.
There's never a dull moment. Hey, thank you so much for the opportunity to announce this on the show, and the timing worked out perfectly. So I hope there's some good nuggets in the conversation, and it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, Garrett Marshall.
Thank you.